Everybody, we'll make a start. People will just grab their coffees and join us. Morena, Mr Deputy Chair. It's lovely to see everyone here, our members from local boards and staff and elected members, and the wonderful Penny Webster, who's going to be joining us shortly. It's just awesome to have you here, Mrs W. So first of all, apologies. I've had a text from Councillor Darby with apologies for lateness, and Councillor Collins for lateness, and Councillor Sayers for absence. So I'm happy to move those. Second. Someone will second. Member Wilcox. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm just going to have to go down to the advisory panel.
Oh, that's fine. You just do what you need to, Councillor Stewart. That's all good. So that's been moved and carried. So we'll move on to declarations of interest. Any particular declarations of interest? No? I'll move the minutes of the 16th. Councillor Filipaina, are you happy to second?
Oh, yes.
I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And public input. So I'm going to invite Penny forward together with, I think you've got a few people with you, Penny, and she's going to talk to us about the local bill on mangrove control. Just when Penny and I thought we might never have to talk about mangroves again, we just are. Warm welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr Mayor, good morning. Ex-colleagues, good morning. New colleagues, good morning. Yes, I didn't ever think I'd need to talk about mangroves again. However, Madam Chair, I was in a position a couple of weeks ago where I was in Thames having coffee with Mayor Gowdy, and she was telling me that the Thames Coromandel District Council and Hauraki District Council have put together a mangrove management bill, which is a local bill that they're hoping will go to Parliament, supported by their local MP. Can I first of all introduce Graham Purdy, who probably doesn't need any introduction, from the south, and of course Thomas Grace from the west, the Kaipara Harbour. The bill actually is about getting management plans put together for managing mangroves. As you know, the spread of mangroves in the coastal areas of all our councils have been increasing concern to local communities because they're narrowing the waterways and making it very difficult. Aerial photography from the 1940s, as we saw during the unitary plan, showed minimal mangrove incursions into our harbours and sandy white beaches, both in the Firth of Thames, the Kaipara Harbour, and in the northern reaches of Rodney. So I know that during the unitary plan this was a real issue, and I know that in the early stages of the unitary plan, both Roger Blakely and Penny Pirrett in those days, the original one that went out, said photographic evidence up to the 1940s. Unfortunately, in the unitary plan, it ended up as a resource consent and ended up back to the 1990s. I have to say that I have been supported in coming here today by the Omaha Beach community, by the Whangatiao Harbour, Sandspit Harbour, and the Warkworth Maharangi River Restoration Trust. The Restoration Trust, for example, which I am now chair of the advisory board, took many years and much money trying to get a resource consent to clean the river up. In the early days of Auckland Council, you remember we, with many of the staff, went down that river on the Jane Gifford, which was brought up from Waiuku and put together, and it was going to be a tourist venture for the town of Warkworth. Unfortunately, what's happened is the Jane Gifford, which is a flat scow, can now only go on our either side of the tide, so it actually can't get down the whole Maharangi River. And we've managed to get a resource consent to restore that river, which will be good for the town. But it's a lot of money and a lot of effort. So this bill actually is very good because it it's not talking about removing mangroves. It's talking about removal, prevention, monitoring, detection, control, destruction or disposal, including hand removal, mechanical removal, whole tree removal and maintenance dredging. It actually is talking about setting up as part of the bill, and I've got a copy here that I can give the Secretary and they can give it to the councillors, to facilitate the removal of mangrove vegetation in coastal areas of each council to appropriate levels. So we're not talking about total removing. To restore, protect and enhance the amenity values or the ecosystems of the coastal area. And the management plan must include identification of areas within the coastal area, reference to maps, statement of objectives of the plan, a description of methods to be used, all the usual things. And the adoption and review of the mangrove management plans, which allows each council to establish a committee of council to prepare, adopt and implement the mangrove management plan. The committee must include one iwi representative. And within 3 months of the completion of the special consultative procedure, the council must prepare a final mangrove management plan. It gives the power back to the council and the communities to work together on these plans. Now, I'm aware that there, and particularly in Waiuku, thanks to Councillor Cashmore, they were able to get a resource consent and a 30-year consent to clean the mangroves there, but very dependent on who either your local board people are, your local council, you know, the councillor, how you, and even staff that are involved, whereas this bill will take it out of that. So I'm asking Auckland Council, and I know Mayor Goff was asked by Mayor Gowdy and wrote back and said, no, you wouldn't be involved at this stage, but I would really like a discussion at another time that you would support this bill through to select committee to allow the public to have their say on what they think. I'd like to ask Graham to make some comments because he will give you the costs of the issues that he's going through, and then maybe Thomas would like to tell you about the kaipara. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks Penny.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My main concern is the cost of all this to whether you look at it that the local people do it or that ratepayers pay for it. It's been extraordinarily costly, the whole exercise. I've been involved in this since about 2001. So, and we've slowly made some progress, but we're doing Conifer Grove at the moment, which is under our management plan, and the consent, or the resource consent, is costing $26,000. And also now, with health and safety and everything, to get contractors to do it, it's somewhere between $87,000 per hectare to $114,000 per hectare. So the whole issue has become rather expensive. Secondly, I think somewhere along the line there needs to be a line drawn in regard to how much more we're going to allow the mangroves to expand. I realise the people on the eastern side have not quite the same problem, but on the Manukau, which has been the dumping ground for a number of years of everything that nobody wants, it's certainly now we're in the situation where the community want to get access to their waters, but they can't get it because of the mangroves. And as I said, the whole complex or the whole removal process is so complicated by officers of council who want this done and that done, helicopters used to remove them, that this has become almost too hard for some communities to handle.
Hi, just Penny's covered it very well, but referring to the Kaipara River, back in the middle 50s, we had an American frigate come up the Kaipara River. I remember that as a school kid and going down to see it. They were able to turn it around in the river. Now, it'd be very hard to turn a kayak round in the river, to be quite honest. It's progressively clogging up with the mangroves that have moved up from the Kaipara and up to the river. It's moving further and further up the creek. I was down there the other day just by chance and was really concerned about the build-up of the silt on the side of the Kaipara River and the narrowing of it because of the mangroves and the way they successfully stop every little bit of silt that comes down the river, and very little gets washed out to its natural source out with the Kaipara. It's just ongoing, and it's been a concern to me for some considerable time that we can't do anything about it. So it's just a small picture into what's happening, and it is clogging the creek up, and we now need to give it some undivided attention. And I would say the distance from either side of the creek is it's diminishing on a ever increasing and fast basis. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. I think we put our case reasonably succinctly. We'd like the committee to have a look at this bill and decide whether or not Auckland supports it. We're urging you to support it. Interestingly enough, as Glenn will probably attest, the Makarau in the early days, the canoes used to come right up that Makarau River. I don't think they'd have much chance getting up there now. So it is an issue to everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Penny. Now, I'm just going to keep we've probably got time for maybe one or two questions. Just can you remind us of the time frame for this, if we were going to?
I think it's fairly imminent to be put into Parliament.
Okay. And I'm just, as you said quite correctly, the Mayor took advice and, quite correctly stated that we'd work this through at length in the unitary plan. But I think it might be one of those issues where there's probably nothing wrong with having a bit of a collective discussion and a bit of advice from staff about whether, what the downside of participating in this would be. We can't do that now because we don't have the information, and I don't want us to have a discussion on mangroves. They are the longest workshops I think I've ever sat through, and we don't need to do that now.
No.
So perhaps rather than go into a range of questions, if people are comfortable, we can follow this up with staff and perhaps organise a bit of a collective discussion on if there is a mind to look at some sort of support, or if not supporting the bill, where we would like to take this. People are comfortable. I think there's reasonable head nodding around the table. So Penny, thank you to you and Thomas and Graham, who have come along to support, and perhaps if you're happy for us to liaise directly with you on where we take this to.
I do actually have a copy of the bill.
That would be fantastic.
Anne wants to.
We will hand that around so people can read.
You'll be very delighted to know it's about 4 pages.
That's the
It's 2
upside
pages of introduction.
Well, that's very good building.
It's fantastic.
I'm
well,
sure
I'd
Mayor
like
Goff
to...
and
Councillor Fletcher will never remember them being that short before.
Well done. Well, I'd like to warmly thank Mrs Webster, Thomas Grace and Graham Purdy for their attendance. And seconded by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you around the table. We miss you hugely.
I got on the bus this morning and decided I didn't really miss it.
I assure you it's better out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll move on to local board input. There is none, no extraordinary items and no notices of motion. And I've invited Jenna Wooten, and I think, Steve, are you going to join Jenna, or is it just Jenna who's going to do the presentation on World Masters Games? And Jenna is the chief executive who led, managed, brought together an extraordinarily complicated and huge piece of work and executed it with passion, commitment and aplomb. And I have to say, Jenna, your media that you did during that entire time was an example of pure professionalism. We're very proud of you. So hand over to you to give us a bit of a roundup of how it all went.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be back here this morning to provide you with an overview of how things went. And I have to say, I'm still pinching myself each day at the moment, because after 4.5 years of being so invested into this one project, it's a very strange feeling now going through the evaluation and dissolution process. But true to form, I thought we might kick this morning off with a bit of video, bit of colour and movement. But unlike the videos that I've shared with you over the past few years, what you're going to see this morning is a video which is, of course, of the games that took place here during April.
Here's your story, let's begin. The world is fine, come on, dive in. The future's here, it's right before your eyes. Step by step, you're on your way. Welcome to a brighter day. Don't you know it feels good to be alive? You could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl. You could fly higher than the sky, shine brighter than the stars. You could have all you ever wanted, shoot the moon and reach for Mars. You know you could. Yeah, times are changing everywhere. Do we dream and do we dare? It's up to you. The door is open wide. Feel the rhythm of today. Heart and join the play. The world is here. Let's take it for a ride. You could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl. You could fly higher than the sky, shine brighter than the stars. You can have all you ever wanted. You know you could.
So, that is a bit of a snapshot of what took place between the 21st and the 30th of April this year. And as many of you know, the event can be summarised by saying 28 sports, 48 competition venues, 10 days with athletes coming from 100 different countries. And what I think is pretty special is those are numbers and those are statistics that we have talked about now since 2012, when Auckland was awarded the hosting rights for the 9th edition of the World Masters Games. But what we are now able to start talking about is exactly what happened, which in many cases is far greater and more successful than was ever dreamed possible. So, as a lot of you know, I am a big fan of numbers, and I am a big fan of always coming back to the business case with which the investment decision was made by the City of Auckland and the New Zealand Government. And this slide here sort of recaps the very ambitious KPIs that were set when Auckland and New Zealand decided to bid for the Games. The way I often group them is with both economic and social, and I think it's very easy to focus on the economic because obviously that is the primary return that governments and cities are looking for when investing in major events. But with an event of the scale of the World Masters Games, of course, there were many social outcomes that were also being sought. So we were wanting approximately 50% of the 28,334 projected participants to come from within New Zealand. We were wanting a significant volunteer workforce. We were wanting Aucklanders and New Zealanders to be more healthy and engaged in sport later in life. So I'm just going to leave those with you and we will come back to them shortly. What I wanted to touch on was the approach that we took over the 4.5-year journey, and it's always interesting when you pick up a project like this. It's very easy to fall in the trap of doing what has been done before. And if you look at the World Masters Games, it's an event that's happened since 1985. It's happened in some impressive cities around the globe. It would have been very easy for us to look at Sydney in 2009 as they were the best games that had taken place across the previous 8 editions. Sydney had a tremendous budget. They had world-class Olympic venues, obviously coming off the back of the Sydney Olympics, and they had a number of Olympic models and templates that they used to deliver their games. What we did back in 2013 when we set off on the journey was we put all of that to one side, and we said, you know what, we have fantastic expertise in the city. We have a fantastic reputation of doing things in an innovative and creative way. Let's start this from a blank sheet of paper. And that is something that has served us very, very well over the 4.5-year journey. We were a small LOC from day one, and we remained small right through to games time. We made the decision to operate a decentralised model, and what I mean by that is rather than bringing a huge number of people into a central organisation, into our organisation, what we decided to do was actually go, you know what, let's partner with organisations that do this very well as part of their day-to-day business. So World Masters Games 2017 Limited, which is a council-controlled organisation. Our shareholder is 80 and obviously links through to Auckland Council. But rather than bringing a huge amount of people into our organisation, we partnered with national sporting organisations. We partnered with other council-controlled organisations. We partnered with organisations that did business in the city very effectively and who were going to be around long after 2017 when we shut down the organising committee. And that's another one of the great legacies that we will leave behind. We were very clear in deciding from day one that we wanted one program of work that spanned across 4 years, and that at every step of the journey we wanted our customers to be front and centre. We were trying to attract 28,334 customers from 100 different countries around the globe who had the decision of where they wanted to spend their money. So we needed to make sure that what we were creating with this event, with this product, was going to meet their needs and be attractive enough for them to, in many cases, travel halfway around the world. And we also knew that we wanted to settle for nothing less than a world-class team of professionals working on this project. It wasn't good enough to just be technically expert in your field. You had to have a passion and an enthusiasm for Auckland and for the benefits that this event stood to deliver for our city and for our people. One of the other things we did, which stands out to me, is something that put us in really good stead over the journey, was we identified what we called our moments of truth. And with a project of this scale, we knew that there could be many areas where we chose to invest our time and our money, but we needed to be quite selective about where the funds were going to go and how we were going to use our time in order to make the best possible games experience for our participants. And this slide gives you an indication of the 9 moments of truth. Now, these were never made available publicly, but they certainly guided us as an organisation and helped to order our thoughts and where we were investing and where we were spending our time. And if you look at what we delivered over the 10-day period, I would hope that each of these areas would be areas that stood out to participants as being world-class, because we knew that they were critical to ensuring a world-class athlete experience. In terms of what we learnt, the first one is obviously a pretty big one, and many of you know that this has been a dream and this has been a vision that has been very bold from day one. We had to have that dream, and we had to have it when no one else did, and we never moved from it. As is often the case with projects like this and major events, there are a lot of critics, and there are a lot of people that will try and push you off the path along the journey. We never once wavered from saying that we wanted this to be the best ever World Masters Games. We never compromised on that vision. And for us to be declared the best games ever by the President of the International Masters Games Association on the 30th of April was a pretty special moment for Auckland indeed. Another one of the key learnings for us was around research. So we essentially built a customer proposition. We built a product from a blank sheet of paper, and we didn't do that based on what previous events had done or what had worked or not worked in Auckland previously. We built the product and we built the games based on our research results and what potential customers and current customers were telling us. And as a result of that research, we actually changed a number of the ideas and the number of thoughts that were in the original bid documentation, and that were part of our organisation's thinking very early on. But what it showed our customers was that we were responsive, we were agile, and we were interested in creating an experience and a product that would work for them. Another thing we learnt was that you've absolutely got to reinvent the wheel. It can be very easy to sit back and look at what's worked in the past and what's been successful in the past and say, you know what, we're going to roll that out again. And I think there was a lot of us that were involved in the World Masters Games that were also involved in the Rugby World Cup. And it would have been really nice to roll out some of the things that we did there and just consider that a nice little tick. But the World Masters Games was a fundamentally different product. It was a fundamentally different audience. And it required innovation, and it required a different way of doing things. And I'm incredibly proud that we didn't rest on our laurels and we didn't look at what we did there and just settle for that. We continued to raise the bar and set a new benchmark for how major events are delivered in Auckland. Another thing we learnt along the way is that you've got to stand up for what you believe in, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily make you the most popular kid in town. And one of the greatest challenges we had over the four and a half year journey was working with the accommodation sector. It's an interesting thing, a project like this, where something external to your organisation has the ability to derail what you're doing and impact the KPIs you have so dramatically. And for us, it was one of those levers that the reality was, as much as I liked to think that we could influence the way they were going to do things, we couldn't. And what that meant was that I was literally sitting down begging and pleading with individual operators to price reasonably, to come on board and to help make these games a success. So for us, you know, we knew from our customer that what was happening wasn't working. We knew it wasn't necessarily going to make us the most popular by coming out and confronting the issue head on, but we did so, and it was the right thing to do. Authenticity, for us, this was about making sure that the games reflected who we were and what Auckland was all about. And what you would have heard me talk about often was that our games was always going to be about three key components: world-class sport, a world-class social program, and a world-class destination. At not one point did we place a higher value of importance on those three pillars. It's very easy in a major sporting event environment to always elevate sport. Much to the displeasure of some people, that wasn't the event we set out to create. It wasn't the event we promised to our customers, and it certainly wasn't what we felt was going to see this event declared the best ever games. So authenticity from day one has been big for us. As has the need for teamwork. From day one, we always have said this wasn't something that we could do by ourselves. We were an organisation of 64 people at our peak time. We ended up having over 3,200 volunteers work alongside us. We had a phenomenal amount of support from ATEED, from Auckland Council, from Auckland Transport, from RFA. We had a phenomenal level of support from our 28 sport partners and our 48 venue partners. This was about bringing together a collection of agencies who shared the vision, who shared the dream, and were willing to work alongside us tirelessly to get the outcome. So, look, I don't want to skirt over KPIs today because I know that's what everyone is particularly interested in, and there's nothing that I am looking forward to more so than announcing the detail that sits behind this. Unfortunately, the only detail I can confirm 100% at this point is that we have exceeded the participant KPI that was set for us. And we have exceeded the 2 satisfaction KPIs. We're about 3 weeks away from being able to confirm the GDP and the visitor night KPIs, but the data that is being crunched is looking very favourable. So what we will be doing as part of our evaluation process is absolutely being fully transparent in terms of how we're reporting against these KPIs. We've been very public with them and how we would measure success from day one, and we will ensure that we can conclude the process in the same fashion. So because I won't be around when this information becomes available to you, I'm sure Steve and the team at ATEED will be bringing the final results back, and hopefully there will be plenty to celebrate. So in terms of what's next, major events have once again, through the World Masters Games, shown that they present an unprecedented opportunity to deliver not just economic benefit, but social benefit. What I think has been shown far more so than ever before is exactly what the Auckland Council family can achieve when it's working together on a project like this. And I really want to acknowledge the support of Auckland Council, of ATEED, of Auckland Transport and RFA specifically for their involvement and their genuine partnership in making this come to life. This was a huge undertaking. This was far more complex than Rugby World Cup. It's far more complex than anything New Zealand has delivered from a major event point of view before. And we are being talked about globally as a world-class major events destination far more so than ever before. So I think it puts us in very good stead with the 28 international sporting federations that were here during Games time. We certainly have a significant number of advocates around the globe now for Destination Auckland and what the city is capable from a major events point of view. And I hope that it has opened eyes both in central government and locally around what might be next and what could be possible. So I'd just like to thank you all for the role that you also played. It's been a real pleasure having the opportunity to come and speak with you all. I know I have called on your support over many times during the 4.5-year journey, and you have shown that support in a variety of different ways. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to lead the organisation responsible for this project. It's been a great pleasure of mine and will certainly be a highlight of my career. So thank you.
Well done. Jenna, thank you. We've got, we've got a recommendation that we're just typing up, and I'm going to ask the Mayor for comment. Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair, but you've just thanked us, Jenna, but I really want to, on behalf of all of us as councillors, to thank you for a magnificent job over that very long period of time, and also to ATEED through you, Steve, for a job that I think was incredibly well done. It's a high-risk venture. You know, before these events, you always think, God, there are so many things that can go wrong. And when Kai Holm stood up at the closing ceremony and said what he'd said to me privately, that this was the best Games ever, he actually meant that. And it was the best Games ever, firstly because of the competency and efficiency with which it was run, and that was really important. It was really important to us reputationally as Aucklanders. But it was also, you know, because of the friendliness and the warmth of the welcome that Aucklanders gave. And I saw that right at the start on the opening night, just travelling by train through to Eden Park and just watching how people were engaging with the athletes and the buzz that existed. So I think that you achieved those KPIs admirably in terms of the sporting event, the social event, and Auckland as a destination. And if Auckland in the future did consider applying for a Commonwealth Games, I think the reputation that you established about our ability to organise that really effectively would stand us in good stead. So huge job for you, huge event for the city. I think we really benefited from that. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for everything that you did, and thank you, ATEED, for the big effort that ATEED put in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Mr Mayor, we've just added some words to the recommendation. I wonder if you'd like to move it, and it's personally acknowledging Jenna's role in the leadership of the team and in achieving the extraordinary success of the event. And if you'd like to move that, I think that would be lovely.
Be very happy to move that way, Madam Chair.
And I'll second that. We've probably got time for a couple of questions. Oh, lots of questions. Bearing in mind that the information, as Jenna said, on the final confirmation of the economic success of the event will be coming back to us, may well be reported through to finance, I think, would probably be a good thing to report through there. So we've got Councillor Quacks, Councillor Casey, Councillor Simpson, and Lott, and the rest. So, Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, and congratulations, Jenna, on the great job that you and your committee and organisers did on this. And I just want to follow up around the question that the Mayor alluded to, and that's about a possible bid for future Commonwealth Games. Do you think that, from what you've seen, and it's a terribly complex event that you've just come out of, and I suspect that the Commonwealth Games is just as complex but much more expensive. Do you think that the Commonwealth Games, that we as a city, or maybe even as a Upper North Island region, could at some stage, and to keep in mind the financial constraints, host the Commonwealth Games, maybe 2026, 2030?
Through the chair, it's a question that I will respond with my view personally, as opposed to the view of anyone else. Yeah. But I have been reported as saying, and I still certainly believe this, that New Zealand should be looking at a bid for a Commonwealth Games, and whether it is feasible and it is something that stacks up as a business case in its own right will only be known once that work is done. My personal view is that it wouldn't be feasible to have an Auckland-only bid. Right. I think it should be a national bid. I think the Commonwealth Games Federation is more so than ever open to innovative ways of delivering the Commonwealth Games. And I think Auckland's track record in delivering world-class major events in an innovative way would put us in very good stead to be a part of a bid. So yes, I would like to see that discussion happen. I think it would be a tremendous shame. I've had the privilege of being involved in the major event sector in Auckland for 17 years now. If you look at the progress and the wins that we've had since 2006, 2007, over 10, 11 years, it has been phenomenal. What that path over the next 10 years looks like is pretty vacant, if you will. So I would certainly like to see the success and the learnings that have been built over the past 10 years continue into the future.
Yeah. Just to comment, if I may, about the Commonwealth Games. And I think in terms of what's happened with the Commonwealth Games since the Kuala Lumpur Commonwealth Games is they've become very, very big. And the reason why Kuala Lumpur expanded the Commonwealth Games in when I forget what year they had it in, early 2000s, late 1990s, but they increased the size of the Commonwealth Games and the number of events that were in it in order to show that they could bid at a future time for the Olympic Games. And I think it's really important that if we do look at a bid for the Commonwealth Games, we actually try and pare it down, because it's got to the stage now, and we've seen this now with Durban, that very few cities will ever be able to hold the Commonwealth Games unless they're pared down. And Auckland will absolutely have no chance of holding the Commonwealth Games on its own, especially if they're not pared down to the 10 sports that were originally there for, I think, since the beginning of the Commonwealth Games, to the time of the KL Commonwealth Games. And I think we need to look at what sports are in the Commonwealth Games and what sports are perhaps excluded to make it more manageable for cities the size of Auckland to be able to host them.
Okay. So I agree, and thanks for that, Councillor Quacks. I'm sure we will have many discussions about that issue, but not so much now. Councillor Casey.
Thanks, Jenna. I'm also interested in the social targets, and one in particular is the army of volunteers who helped deliver the games, many of whom were Rugby World Cup volunteers also. Can you just say a couple of things, just a quick overview of the volunteer army?
Yeah, so I had the immense privilege of working very closely with them. I made the decision quite early on that I would front every orientation session we had for each of our 3,200 volunteers. And it was one of the most inspiring things that I've done over the 4.5-year journey. These people were such a diverse range of people. Yes, many of them Aucklanders, but we had volunteers from elsewhere in New Zealand and also from offshore as well. We have got some phenomenal data. One thing that you can always guarantee with volunteers is they are very good at responding to surveys and providing you with feedback. So we have a rich collection of data that we will be leaving with ATEED around what motivated these people to get involved, what they enjoyed about their experiences, and also the enthusiasm they have for continuing to volunteer. So we asked each of them to give us the ability to remain in contact with them, or ATEED, I should say, to remain in contact with them beyond the games. And a significant proportion of the 3,200 have said they want to continue volunteering and continue being engaged. The Mayor very kindly spoke at a thank you function that we held at the Town Hall for volunteers, and I think he saw firsthand how proud they were to have been a part of this and doing something quite unique for Auckland. Unlike Rugby World Cup, this was an event that had over 28,000 participants that were real people. Yes, there was a small proportion of them that were Olympians and world champions, but the majority of them are people that we could all relate to. And when they saw the scale firsthand of how big the games were and how complex the operation was, they certainly took an immense amount of pride, as they should have, in helping us to make it happen.
Good question. Thanks, Councillor Casey. Councillor Denise Lee.
Thank you very much. Really echo the congratulations comments on the games. I will never forget sitting at a Mount Eden bar after the opening ceremony with my sister. We enjoyed the ceremony, but then watching the most diverse group of people come in and enjoy a drink together. They old, young, all sizes and shapes, in different colours and team jackets. It was just a vibrant, wonderful atmosphere, and exactly what I thought it would be. So really, absolute pleasure to be part of that. Jenna, I do have a question though in regards to something that did come up and pop up on social media, I think for many of us, and that was after the opening ceremony. It's sort of a good problem to have, and that was the call by members of the public or residents in Auckland wanting to have attended the opening ceremony, and why were there not tickets available, and especially when, look, I'm sure you've addressed this, but for our purposes, because I know a couple of councillors commented on this and referenced it on social media, just the idea that some residents felt a bit shut out, especially when athletes left the stadium and they had the appearance of empty seats.
Sure. So there's a couple of things I'd like to just make comment on with that. The first is we had to develop a product, and with that product came a value proposition. One of the significant inclusions within the value proposition of the World Masters Games is attendance at the opening ceremony. So we were quite open in saying there were two ways that you could attend. You could attend as an athlete, and there were packages available for athletes, a gold, a silver and a bronze. But if you weren't interested in playing sport, you were just interested in the opening and closing ceremony, the participant-only parties, the backpack and the bits and pieces that came within that, you could purchase a supporter accreditation. So that was the ticket and the means that people could get access to both the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony. So they were available. The reason why, and I agree, there was a lot of people saying, oh, well, why weren't tickets sold just to the opening ceremony? That's because we had reached capacity. We sold over 28,500 packages to the games, which meant that we were at capacity at Eden Park, because with the level of infrastructure we built with the stage, we did take out a number of seats, so we literally had sold every single seat through the sale of participant packages. There weren't just additional tickets that were available that we could have sold for a separate pricing structure.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. I've got two more people and then we will need to move on. We've got quite a full agenda and a workshop that we were hoping to start at 11:30. That time frame's slipping away a little bit. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm interested in the data on the accommodation nights that go with this event, because this has been one of the ones that has, one of the events that has been mooted as, being quite significant around that. You made a comment in your presentation that I just want you to expand upon, that you begged and requested the accommodation sector to work with you. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, we had a KPI that over 50% of our participants would be coming from offshore. So there's a fair assumption there that a significant number of those would require accommodation. And what we started hearing very early on in 2015 was that people were interested in coming. The proposition that we had put out for the games was attractive to them. But what was precluding them from making that step forward was the price of accommodation in Auckland. So we worked on a number of different solutions to that. One was partnering with alternate accommodation providers. So we partnered with Airbnb and MyWay, who were fantastic organisations to work with, incredibly supportive, engaged, and able to offer accommodation options at a reasonable price. We also partnered with pretty much every school boarding house in Auckland to make those available as options. But over and above that, what I was having to do was meet one-on-one with hotel operators in Auckland to explain to them the problems we were having, explain to them the feedback we were getting from customers, and to make them aware that they were quite a critical ingredient for us in making these games successful. We weren't going to achieve the GDP number and the visitor night numbers if there wasn't movement in pricing, because we simply weren't going to get the level of international participants being involved. So it certainly consumed a significant amount of our time as an organising committee. ATEED also provided us with resource through their eyesight network to help us. And what it came down to towards the end, we actually had 3 full-time staff working one-on-one with customers, trying to find accommodation options that were within the price point that people could afford. We were that focused on ensuring that it didn't derail the success of the games, that we got to that level of involvement.
Thank you. If we can pick that discussion up separately as well, Councillor Simpson. And last question, Councillor Clow.
Actually, no, it was about the fact that you championed the customer in the accommodation space, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, councillors. Good questions. And thank you, Gina, again. And we look forward to the follow-up from the final number crunching. I think that's going to be certainly something very worthwhile. And Steve, just acknowledging ATEED and the huge commitment to this process. You got a pretty rough ride from us when it was all first mooted and the budgets were looked at. It's amazing how happy we all are out the other end when we finally see the numbers. So well done. Yeah. So I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you both.
Thank you.
So we move on to item 10, and hopefully this one's pretty straightforward. Steve, team. This is our submission that hopefully we will authorise, given the very short time frame, as always, for the preparation of this. So we'll take this as read. Just, guys, have you got anything you want to add?
No.
It's pretty straightforward. Any questions? Member Wilcox.
I just want to query you on your Maori impact statement. Only because the majority of plantation pine in Auckland is the result of treaty settlement. So have we kind of... I was just thinking that perhaps we should mention that in our submission, because I think that's an important factor. That would lead possibly to, especially in some of these forests, Mangawhai, Woodhull, Riverhead, I'm not sure the ones in the south, but that could also lead to them kind of wanting Section 33 under RMA, so I'm just wondering where we'd go with this.
Yes, Madam Chair, the charges for monitoring the permitted activities would fall on the operator. So if the operator was found to be not complying with the permitted activity, then it would be the operator who paid the charge, not the landowner. So just to clarify that.
Supplementary. Yeah, no, I've got no query on that. You know, he who stuffs up ends up paying for it. My real issue is actually that in our submission, I think recognition needs to be made that unlike a lot of New Zealand, I mean, Tree Lords down south, of course, would be another one, but we're one of the few councils where most of our plantation forest is iwi owned as a result of treaty settlement.
Okay, I think we can add that as for information. We discussed this at the run-through, and Councillor Filipaino and I raised this, as this is a relevant issue for Auckland, and the critical thing is that we need to also encourage the government to do the consultation directly with mana whenua and iwi. We can't necessarily do that on their behalf,
No.
so we'll make sure that that point's included in the submission. Okay, Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have you, when forming the submission, consulted with the industry at all for their opinions?
The update to the NES is out for full consultation, so the industry can make their own submissions, but due to the short time period, we've only consulted internally within council with the resource consents compliance team.
Right. And just one other point, I just correct you, say yes, that the contractors would cover the expense of any fees for ongoing monitoring. Having just finished milling a fair number of trees on our private property at record high prices, the contractors pass on all costs and there is nothing in growing pine trees.
Okay. And that's interesting, but we will still monitor and make sure that the environment's not being degraded, and we'll still charge people accordingly. So
I'm just
we
making the
hear
point,
your
Madam Chair.
pain, and we go
But the Deputy
whatever.
Mayor feels much better having said it.
It does. Thank you for sharing, Bill. So I'm happy to move that recommendation. If there's a seconder for that, Councillor Close, happy to second. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
And well done with the turnaround and the short timeframes that government seems to give us for everything they call on us to consult on. So we move on to item 11, which is the non-contestable grants program. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take this report as read, but just to give some context to it, this is the non-contestable and term grants that are executed via ACE. These are decisions that are made by the LTP process and are debated at that point in time, and we bring this report to you today, as we do every year, to provide us with the mechanism to actually execute the funding agreements. So the decisions made are actually part of the LTP process, and any changes to those decisions, the next opportunity will be the LTP discussion and debate.
Okay. So the next LTP is where we then can unpack some of these and say, let's have a look at the guaranteed visitor usage, let's have a look at the regional equity issues, let's have a look at all of the ideas that people have, or concerns that people have around these non-contestable grants. But at the moment, this is a bit of a have-to job. Okay. Questions? Not? Would you like? Oh, Councillor Cooper. Sorry, Councillor.
That's all right. Just in terms of the Q Theatre, I mean, it was originally envisaged that we wouldn't be funding this, I guess, way back when it was built. And now we are, and just want to understand where that's going. Is this just going to be for a forever thing, or are they going to get to their some sort of long-term sustainability without $500,000 from us every year?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think my understanding was the original proposition did include an ongoing consequential OPEX for the building. In terms of is it going to be sustainable, I would I would doubt that it would reach sustainability. It operates in the same kind of marketplace as our own council-run facilities, which obviously receive a fair bit of subsidy. So I think the debate needs to happen about what is the business model and what are our expectations for Q Theatre to actually deliver upon that. And I think that's a good LTP discussion, but also looking at the wider network of what else is out there and what is the split between regional, local funded, etc.
Let's have a supplementary question. So, I mean, this has happened more than once. So Bruce Mason had to be taken up. This had to be taken up. Have you got anything else on the horizon that might have to be saved by us?
Can we perhaps, I think the LTP's the opportunity for that, because I think it's a very good question.
So we'll have a wider
Councillor
discussion
Cooper.
around current
We need to have a
theatres.
much wider discussion about this, but at the moment these are sort of set in place, but we certainly need to unpack it during the LTP and, as I said before, work out the regional equity, the ongoing sustainability and the time frame.
And through you, Madam Chair, just to add to that, I think to look at this report is difficult because it is in isolation, and I think for you to make that decision in that debate, we need to look at what else is out there and really have a good evaluation of the environment.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will move.
You happy to move, Councillor
Yep, I'll second.
Philippina? Seconded. Councillor Casey. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to move to reorder our agenda. We've got the next two items are connected, but I think they make much more sense if we discuss first of all the wider reasons around the role of public art in Auckland, and then we discuss the details. So I'm going to move that we deal with item 13 and then deal with item 12. Is there a seconder? Councillor Philippina.
It's up to you, Chair.
Oh, it's already up there.
Yeah.
Crikey. No predetermination and bias on our part there. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Thank you for that. We're just going to get the other two people who are going to present. Just to give some frame for this, this is an information-only item, and we thought it was an opportune time with the new term to actually just touch base about why we actually present and get involved in public art. So this is kind of a framing thing, and we thought it would be a good opportunity to frame it in terms of the City Rail link, to try and give you a bit of an insight into why we're getting involved, why we think there's an opportunity there. We're not asking for a decision or anything. As I say, this is purely framing and to whet the appetite, I guess, in terms of how we approach public art in our city. So to assist me here today, I've got Ben Corbin. Ben Corbin is a member of the APAPA. Now, APAPA stands for our Advisory Panel for Art in Public Places, and this is our independent board of experts who advise us, provide a curatorial oversight to ensure that we are consistent with the sector and are making the appropriate decisions according to ratepayer spend, etc. So we've asked Ben along here today as a member of the panel, but also integral part of the creator studio that we've created for the City Rail Link. Given this presentation raises questions, but also seeks to explain through the presentation, would ask if we can have questions at the end, if that's okay. Thank you. I'll hand over to Ben.
Great. Are those blades away? So today's presentation is in two parts. The first part is a general overview of public art, and the second part is an introduction to the opportunity for public art within the CRL. So, by way of introduction, what is public art? Simply art made for people in public or civic spaces. And it really covers a spectrum of creative practice, from work that is temporary, like performance or sound or moving image works, to work that is permanent and enduring, like sculpture, or work that is integrated into architecture and infrastructure. And it's got all sorts of different roles to play in defining a city. So for centuries it's been used to help people remember, from monuments to people as markers of change. If we look at Nelson's Column by Bailey and Landseer in the heart of London in Trafalgar Square, or we look at the Lincoln Memorial in the seat of democracy in Washington DC, one of the most visited public memorials in the US. Conversely, it can be memorials as records of events and places of significance. a Holocaust memorial in Berlin by Peter Eisenman. And locally, if we look out at the Mana Whenua of Auckland and the po that represents sites of significance, this work was commissioned by Ngāti Manahiri at Tāwhanui, north of Auckland. Public art can be landmarks that attract and orientate people in public space. Anthony Gormley's Angel of the North at Gateshead, or the American sculptor Claes Oldenburg's many works, this one in Tokyo. It can be used to entertain and create atmosphere through temporary events, Jeff Koon's Puppy, or more recently, Christo's Floating Piers work on Lake Iseo in Italy in 2016, one of the most visited and published works in global media in the last year or so. It can be used to enliven spaces and the use of them. Millennium Park in Chicago, part of a significant civic rebuilding project in the home of a number of very large works, including Anish Kapoor's Cloud Gate, which literally reflects the city of Chicago, as well as Plenz's Crown Fountain at the other end of the square, which presents a portrait of the city through the people of the city as a dynamic and engaging interactive work and public fountain. It can reflect character and desirability for residents and visitors. And if we look at some of Janet Eckelman's works in the Netherlands, or locally the Red Line work in Fort Street, which was used to re-enliven that public space. It can be used to reflect the unique culture of a place through the integration of art and architecture. If we look at Renzo Piano's work in New Caledonia, reflecting the Kanak culture both in its form as well as what it holds as a museum and gallery that presents that culture to the public. Locally, the Auckland Art Gallery plays a similar role. It's home to one of the largest public art collections in the work of over 14,000 works, and the building itself is reflective of our material culture, our craft and our flora and fauna. Public art can change the way we move, think and behave in a city, and if you look at the High Line in New York, essentially a piece of disused public infrastructure, but through the integration of art, urban design and architecture, it's become one of the most visited civic spaces in the city, a cultural destination with visitor numbers far beyond any other single gallery or museum in New York City. Similarly, the Light Path in Auckland has done a comparable job in connecting to distinct and disparate parts of the city and re-enlivening it through access. So art can contribute to many things in a city, but we can really group them into three core categories. The first is to attract people in terms of a spectacle to draw people in. Secondly, it can engage people through interaction by presenting the familiar in an unfamiliar way. And thirdly, it can orientate and celebrate by creating new landmarks. This is a work by David Shrigley, literally thumbs up. So public art is an essential part of a city's infrastructure, and if we think about infrastructure in a broader sense, there is both hard infrastructure in terms of the power, water and essential services, everything that a city needs to operate, alongside the soft infrastructure, arts, culture, events, community development and a plethora of other things, which are the things that bring a city to life. And it's those two parts working in harmony that great cities are built on. The importance of public art is also recognised globally through national and regional policies. And if we look at the Percent for Public Art program in the US, initially adopted by the city of Philadelphia in 1959, and since cities across the US, it ensures that 1% of all capital and public infrastructure projects is used to create work which reflects its place and the people of the city. So public art in the CRL. We have a rare opportunity to generate a creative expression of our own cultural identity within our underground transport system. And if you think about transport systems, they not only move people in a functional sense, but they define cities in a cultural sense. 150 years ago, London had the opportunity. Its system reflected the predominant art and architectural movements of the time, Victorian, Edwardian and later Art Deco. 110 years, Paris had the opportunity. its system as well represented the predominant movement of the time Art Nouveau, both in terms of station architecture as well as integrated art throughout the network. 40 years ago, Stockholm had the opportunity, and the city made the bold decision to build the largest underground public art gallery in the world, and has since commissioned a significant number of works throughout its entire network. 10 years ago, Naples had the opportunity in the redevelopment of two of its lines. It treated each station as an artwork in its own right throughout the traveller's journey. And more recently, in the last 12 months, Dusseldorf has had the opportunity and has made the decision to have no advertising within its public underground system at all, instead commissioning public work which integrates art and architecture and urban design into immersive environments which reflect the city, its geography, its people and place. So who are we and where are we going within the transport system? I mean, one of the key aspects from our perspective is as the city changes, we need to reserve what happens underneath it. There are many buildings consented within the central city alone. Most of those buildings are commercial and they reflect the identities of their commissioners, whether they're corporates, local or international. And if we don't capture and reserve the transport system as a space for expression, where there will be less and less places to do it. So the opportunity is to move out beyond large civic gestures towards an art that's integrated into the fabric of the city, reflecting the human dimension, placemaking and creating a sense of belonging. So what's the opportunity? Public art attracts people, builds community, brings people together and creates local identity. Through placemaking, arts and culture makes substantial contributions to local economic development, livability and cultural industry competitiveness. Public art projects will be most effective when they're part of a larger, holistic, multidisciplinary approach to enlivening a city or a neighbourhood. And lastly, the potential for public art is not only to change the physical landscape, but the cultural climate as well. So the opportunity here is for people to see themselves in civic spaces, as well as expressing our differences to the people who visit us. So in terms of how we're going to do this, we've got a creative framework to conceive of art in the public realm, and it's made up of two parts. The first is stable elements, integrated and embedded aspects of cultural identity to create a sense of legibility. We have some standout examples in the city at the moment, including Te Oro, the recent Community and Cultural Centre in Glen Innes, which not only reflects the many cultures of that place, but also integrates art and architecture into a unified experience. Secondly, expressive elements which are landmarks and have impact and orientate the user and create a sense of memorability. The Lighthouse, a bold and iconic work that tells stories about who we are and where we come from on Auckland's waterfront. So the opportunity within the brief for the CRL is to create a unique New Zealand transport experience. If Auckland is one of the fastest growing and most culturally diverse in the cities, it won't be necessarily reflected in our commercial architecture, but we have the opportunity to do it within the CRL. Auckland is the largest Maori city in the world. It's also the largest Polynesian city in the world, and these cultures, along with many others, are a key part of what makes the city unique. We need to find ways to represent our cultures through different forms of creative practice within a contemporary context, in ways that are both temporary and dynamic, as well as ways that are enduring. So in summary, what can public art do within the CRL? It can contribute to the image of a city and reflect who we are. It can help orientate and wayfind the transport system. It can create atmosphere, mood and have a positive effect on the users. And lastly, it can increase patronage across the system by creating a more desirable aesthetic experience. Lastly, creating the image of a city beyond the function of the transport system. The potential is for it to be the largest public art project in New Zealand and a powerful expression of our culture. And if we stop for a minute to think about patronage within our current cultural institutions, approximately 700,000 people a year go to the Auckland Art Gallery. The opportunity within the CRL is for up to 30 million travellers per year, and we believe the integration of public art through these stations will not only showcase our unique cultures and contribute to a positive user experience, but create a strong, legible and memorable city image. Thank you.
Very good.
I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. So this is for today. I will write down who wants to speak. Councillor Casey, Councillor Clow, Councillor, I'll let you do that. The main reason for today was to just remind people why we have and are opening up the discussion on public art in a major way, looking at the opportunities provided by the CRL before we get too far down the track, and also leading into our wider discussion about the funding for the next set of public art, but also leading into the LTP. I think we need to be approaching the LTP with an absolute clear vision that even in a funding constrained environment, we aren't going to neglect the critical issue of art in our city. And it's simply not good enough to say we've got art in art galleries, because we owe it to our communities and all our communities, our diverse communities, to give everybody the opportunity to encounter public art and art in their everyday lives. So that's the reason why we've set out to introduce this item today. So I've got Councillor Casey, Councillor Clow and Councillor Watson.
Yeah, great presentation. I was at the Rainbow Communities Advisory Panel last night, and the issue of public art came up there as a means of raising the visibility of our marginal or vulnerable communities. Any plans for, now that Auckland has made the world rankings for LGBTIQ communities, to have something anywhere in the region to celebrate our rainbow communities?
Through you, Madam Chair, and probably more generic response than you're wanting. But one of the key things that we've done that you'll see in the next report is actually do a stock take of what we have. Since amalgamation, we've really just been finding out what we have, who it's by, and what the stories are that are being told. Part of that process is to understand the gaps and opportunities. So, you know, how many works do we have of a certain artist? How many Māori works? Who are the Māori works by? How many women, etc.? And what are the...
No rainbow.
And no rainbow. So yes, so part of our change in terms of direction of public art over the next few years is to identify those gaps, both geographically as well as genre and opportunity for reflecting stories and issues such as that. So yeah, it's on our horizon to actually make sure that we do capture things.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. Councillor Clow.
That was a really good presentation. Thank you. That's really good. It'd be really good for the LTP if someone pulled the figures together to see what our expenditure is. I'm dreaming if we think we're going to become a 1% city with the arts, because I can't see it happening. But
we managed
I would love to do
Waitakere
it.
as a 1% city.
We did it Waitakere.
And look at all the art we've got.
So it would be good if those figures were pulled together regards the CCOs and everything, just to see what sort of percentage we are. I suspect it's probably about 0.1, or 0.2 of a percent, because 8% would be about 40 million, over 40 million, and we're nowhere near that, that's for sure, when it comes to total expenditure. But and I just hope this doesn't fall flat when it goes forward regards to CRL, because that needs to be done sooner rather than later, with the consortium that's been set up, who has all the power, which is not even a CCO of ours. We are part of it, that's it. There's a challenge there.
It's no coincidence, Councillor, that we're having this presentation today. There's never anything presented that doesn't have an agenda alongside it. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of that public art awareness, and it was mentioned in the last item, to what extent do we take account of the geographical spread of public art? So obviously it's very much city-centred focus, but actually in the suburbs there's huge numbers of people that don't come into the city. I just really like to get a sense of how we look to try and spread it around, and also how we look to consolidate on what we've got. And I think someone mentioned the notion there of doing some stock taking. I can think of some places in my ward, for instance, where there's a kind of public art in the terms of water sculpture that hasn't been working for for X number of years. Do we have the ability to A, have that geographic spread, and B, fix up the pieces of public art that exist that are
essentially defunct.
Councillor, can we pick that up in the next item, because we've got the map and the discussion around OPEX in the next item. So if you're happy for us to go into detail, it's item 12, and we can actually answer the practical questions in that one. So if you're first cab off the rank when we do that item, you happy with that? Okay, Councillor Cooper.
Oh, just to say, I mean, I absolutely support this. I mean, when we did the New Lynn Trench, that was one of the things, and we took the Croatian lace-making woman who developed the glass panels and the beautiful geographic topography that's down in the trench, which has sort of really stopped graffiti because it's so bumpy, but it gets a bit grubby. That's our only issue, is these things don't get clean. But I think in a lot of ways it gets a chance for communities to be involved, and you know, you go to other countries where they have really old underground trains. You know, it might just be the fact that that's tiles and an old sort of name in one area. Then, you know, and look at London, where they really tarted it up for the Olympic Games, and it was just amazing. Every train station was a nice surprise. You go in there and you go, oh, this is a bit different. You know, wonder what it kind of makes you think about where you are, and I think it's really worthwhile, because we just don't need to provide blank canvases for graffiti as well. You know, I think it's a good way to stop graffiti. Yeah. Anyway, support that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
It's not a question.
Thank you, Chair. And comment, is that okay?
It's absolutely fine.
Okay, look, I'm pleased to hear the comments around this table after leading the Public Art and the Arts, Culture and Events Committee over the previous 6 years. And the reason I say that is because it's been a bumpy ride. So hearing the positive comments now, plus also having a look at what percentage we have and will be putting into public art through you, Chair, is awesome to hear. So I look forward to the continued support of public art, especially in relation to the CRL, but I think in relation to the region as well. So thank you, Chair, and also, again, just want to say thank you to our staff that are here.
Thank you. Would you like to move the recommendation,
Yes,
Councillor
please.
Filipaina? That's good. I'm happy to second that. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And thank you. That's a fantastic kind of opener. Started for 10 as we then go into the practical capital arts program now, but it's certainly an issue that we're going to pick up on an ongoing basis. So thank you. Awesome presentation. So same team, next topic. Thanks, Ben. That was great.
I do apologise, I've had 3 agendas in a row. This must be getting boring for you now.
No, it's great. Love it.
Okay, so this is the Rubber Hits the Road report, outlining our public art work program for the next 12 months. I'll take the report as read, but I just will pick up on some of that geographic spread stuff. As I say, we are making a shift in the public art in terms of understanding what our portfolio is and where we're investing money. We've got some key drivers that are pulled out in the report as well, particularly around opportunities for partnership. Public art does cost money. It should be invested in. It's a here and now expense, but actually it's an expense that plays out over 100 years, sometimes more for those really precious works. So therefore, part of driving our program is to look at opportunities for partnerships with the philanthropic sector, partnerships within council and other developments, as well as private development. So we're trying to really look for those opportunities and get the best bang for our buck. Also, another key theme is less projects of a slightly bigger scale with more impact, to have some real key visible projects that identify Auckland as being unique. We don't want to leave a legacy in 100 years' time of Auckland. It's similar to Melbourne, or it's similar to Sydney. We want somewhere that people go, they can have a mental image of what Auckland looks like, and part of that identity is through the public art. Yes, there is a concentration in terms of downtown works. I think there are a lot of opportunities for partnerships and visibility downtown, also for larger expenditure. But there are also some gaps across the region, so we're just trying to balance that across. In the appendix there, Appendix B, we've got a geographical spread of the projects. So the green ones are the projects that we're actually building across the local board areas. The yellows are in design phase at the moment, and we've got a small section of scoping works, which are the blue dots, which go quite far north and quite far south. So it is trying to balance those that geographic spread, but we do start off with an inequitable platform that we're trying to address.
Okay. Is that...
Yeah, that answered that part of the question. Thank you, Richard. The other part of the question was to do with existing public art that is, in a poor state of disrepair or in some cases not working at all.
Yep.
And obviously there's a capital expenditure required to bring that up to scratch, but it's just a very bad look when at some point in time a lot of money has been invested in some sort of work, and it's a public space, often one of the busiest places of where people congregate, and it's just derelict.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think at the front end we've got to get better in terms of making art that lasts and art that is robust and can withstand the environment. Some of the artworks that have been created in the past 30 years didn't anticipate what the environment is like nowadays, particularly around things like glass, and the prevalence of etching into glass and graffiti and vandalism, etc. We do, however, have an annual budget for both renewals and OPEX. So often it's just a matter of identifying what's out there and what the issues are, and we report them through to our asset management and response team, and they should be able to address. We don't think that there's a particular pressure on those budgets, so it's just really us understanding and knowing what's out there. A second part of this is we will move into, in the next few years, looking at the lifespan of projects and say, identifying how long they are going to stay on this earth before we decommission and retire them, because there are some that do need to be retired but it's currently just sitting there not looking great. And it's about being upfront at the beginning of a project to say, hey, this project's going to last 20 years, at the end of 20 years we're going to remove it. We don't want to fast forward 100 years and just keep generating projects and projects and then just having littered legacy everywhere. So it is about that true asset management.
I think it's a really good question, Councillor. I know we had a fountain out west that we suddenly discovered we were spending $12,000 a year cleaning, and despite the fact that it upset people hugely, we just actually closed the fountain, filled it in, did something different. And I think some of those are the hard decisions. There is some artwork that may have been lovely in the 70s, but really time to move on. So those are the tough decisions we're going to have to make. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Just one, I've got an observation first. B10 you've got somewhere in the southern hinterlands. When I lived in Waterview it was closer up to B5. Isn't Heron Park in Waterview?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Kathy, it is, isn't it? So that needs to move up by B5, just in case you're showing somebody this again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess for me, one of the things you made comment before about our Pacific community, yes, but our fastest growing community is our Asian community. So I think that's very important in the inner city as well. Mm-hmm. Yes, we consider the island nations as ours, so to speak, because we're colonising them, but our Asian community is absolutely huge. So the other one was just in terms of, there was the faux walk pathway that you've got in here, but it's not in our LTP going forward, which I hope it is. I'm foreshadowing that, because the faux cycleway, there's nothing in the LTP, but you've got it here. So I'm hoping that's foreshadowing that it's going to be there, because we're no good doing art if we haven't got it in there. And the other one was in terms of sometimes we have partnerships in the motorway corridors, and we did such a partnership with NZTA up round Westgate, and there's these orange things, and they're absolutely disgusting now. They're fantastic, but I don't know who's maintaining them, because I don't know whether there was a partnership that we had to maintain them or not, but they're absolutely awful, and please, can we just find out somebody to sort it out, because everyone hated them except a few of us. But I hate to see it just, so if we're going to do art, we've also got to maintain it. So that was really it, but I mean, I agree with thing, and I just support Councillor Watson, because when I look at 25% of the growth is in the northwest, and we've got one thing going on at the library, and even though there's been a lot of private development, we really need to be looking at that, because that's going to be a huge catchment, and I'd hate to see that sort of bereft. Thank you.
Through the Chair, just a couple of points there. The Northwest, and one of the partnerships things I was talking about before, we want to get bang for buck. So what we're developing is public art strategies for those transform, unlock projects, so largely Panuku based. So whilst they might not be represented here, there will be a strategy for those.
There's no Transform Unlock in the Northwest, it's in Henderson, but that's got a lot of art.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay. So that might be a reason for the 1% discussion in the LTP.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm interested in your approach to private philanthropists who may want to support public art. And I just wondered how you're going about that. Reason being, I think if someone could give me a list of public art locations and potentially what it would cost to put stuff there, I'd like to help you work with that. To the extent that we could maximise the ratepayer investment and do a bit of both with some acknowledgement. But I haven't yet seen a kind of a list of where, as a region, we think the art should go and the opportunities. And therefore, how are we going out to communities to say, look, we'd like to put something here. Well, you know, we've got a small budget, but if there anyone who wants to make an investment in a local community in this place, please contact us. I just don't see that as a obvious work stream, and I think it should be. So how can we do that better?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've initiated conversations with Louise Mason's team because we do think that going forward, we hope that the debate is not whether money should be spent on public art, but the debate should be about how we pay for it. And partnerships has to be included in that. So we've started a conversation, particularly around the opportunity of the CRL and going forward, how are we going to deal with this and get the best bang for buck for the ratepayers? And it's going to be through partnerships. And so we're trying to identify those key opportunities and advance a sort of a process through Louise Mason's team.
Right, okay. I think it's a real opportunity because Auckland loves to invest in it.
So just on that, on Councillor Simpson's very useful point, looking at the budget, we've got year 18 and then through to year 20. Is part of the discussion that could be had looking for partnerships to help part fund some of these pieces of art?
Through you, Madam Chair, the actual list that's there is fully funded and within our budget envelope at this point in time. So no, there hasn't been anything other than the CCO sort of joint thing. So there are no gaps presented in what's here at the moment. That's not to say there aren't opportunities.
But there might be opportunities.
Yeah, supplementary is that if that funding can be funded elsewhere, you potentially have more art availability or savings depending on what you want to do. I'd be keen to actually for more art, to be honest, but.
Yep. I think that's a really useful discussion again going into the LTP because there may be some of these on the shopping list that someone else will pay for, which would then move us sideways and saying we could do something else. So I think we need to keep that conversation live. That's really useful. Member Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree, it was a great report. I really appreciate that. A couple of things. In the context of identity, with respect to the 200 ethnicities that make up our city, it's a bit of a really challenging one to swallow insofar as Māori. It wakes up every day knowing they're Māori, and so the uniqueness of their identity with respect to the world looking in has us defined as that unique identity. And I don't want to let go of that because we have that dual responsibility here at the table. When the councils first came together in late 2009, there were a range of public arts Māori that were out in the field, and we learnt very quickly that very few were insured insofar as the damage that they were exposed to. I just wanted an update, if not some assurance, that that matter's been dealt with in the current status moving forward.
Madam Chair, yeah, I think what you touched on is the po whenua that were around and falling into disrepair. I think we have incorporated them into our asset base. So, and this links to the Northwest Orange Board. So they're not an asset in our asset register. So they're sitting on Auckland NZTA. So they will respond to that maintenance of them. The Powhenua originally weren't in our public art database, but they are now, and we have a response to the Powhenua in terms of maintenance and repair and stuff. Obviously, that required a little bit of work in terms of how we would normally respond. You know, we can't just send any old person out to alter Powhenua. We need to go back to carvers. We need to ensure our response. And some of them will have a different service level in terms of whether it's a painted service or whether it's something that should be weathered and part of a taonga that shouldn't be touched. So we've developed a framework for that.
Just a supplementary to that, because in the context of Māori art, I don't know any Māori artist that does something for 20 years or for the duration of a project. Yep. When European first arrived in the Hunuas, there were 70 mature trees that were fully carved, and they're estimated to be, and this is around the 1838 period, to be at that time 300 years old. So we have a proven background on durability. I just wanted to end in there around, as I said, I don't know any Māori or even any Pacific Island artist that has an appetite for a 20-year duration or whatever. You know, it's a very enduring engagement. So thank you.
Thank you. A good reminder. Same for the Greek and the Egyptian sonnets that, you know, some people don't do things in a 20-year project lifetime. I've got Councillor Casey, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Clow, Councillor Filipaina. No?
I've got two quick questions directed for anybody to answer. The first is about the Mount Albert Town Centre work, which is already, it's not even off the page yet. There's already been controversy about the Tanny Myers Park having stolen the money, which you've sorted, and of course it never appears, the correction never appears. But just on that, when a work is for a town centre, how do you make sure that there is a link between the actual content of the work and the place, Mount Albert? So that's my first question. I can give me the second one as well, if you like.
Can I answer the first one?
Yep.
Just to respond to that, I think we're getting better, and part of it is that the town strategy that we were just talking about before. So before we do a redevelopment, we'll actually get a framework for public art. The Mount Albert was one of those situations where we were bowling forward for our opportunity and then discover that actually someone else was occupying that space at the same time, and it didn't make sense to put public art on top of a mana whenua story. It was just cluttered and confusing. So the response to that is we're trying to back away and actually start the conversations earlier in the project so we don't get to that situation. So I think it's around making sure that we, in the initial framing, we're really clear about what the opportunity is and who we need to talk to.
Thanks for that. The second question was just about ugly infrastructure. You mention in your table about public infrastructure, but you don't mention utility boxes and water towers. And as you know, Paul Walsh's dog at the top of Big King is now attracting people to come visit. So how do they get on your radar to beautify the ugliness around our city that the utility companies plonk?
Through the chair, I think we do acknowledge that there is a part and a focus for communities in terms of beautification. It's not always what we would consider public art. Now, we're not trying to be snobby. We're just trying to have yes, all right. A little bit we are. But this is about trying to create a workable program. So we've got a lot of projects that we're working on. Generally, the utility boxes we do consider beautification, and often a local board will respond to those utility boxes, such as Oraki, who's just entering into a project to beautify their utility boxes. But we try and keep it away from the regional project because it's quite a small expenditure, and it's often a local response.
Okay. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you. Mine's kind of a supplementary to both Councillor Simpson's and Councillor Casey. When it comes to public art and the decision-making that you're seeking from us now, it's around the governance and the roles and the responsibilities of the local boards vis-a-vis those of the governing body, because art does, public art particularly, does tend to attract sometimes differing views. And if we are going to, in commissioning public art for the future, look at the issues of durability and suitability, all of these sorts of things, and especially if we're going out into the marketplace for partnerships in a philanthropic sense, which we've discussed in the past, Richard, how do you see this vexed issue of decision-making and governance being played out? We've got a working party looking at governance at the moment, and I think that perhaps this is a piece of work that should actually be through Phil Wilson, given consideration, because it's not to diminish the role of local boards in any way, shape or form, but there has to be some sort of regional overview and decision making. So I just welcome your thoughts on that.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you've touched on a really big issue, and we struggle with it ourselves in terms of, we have to remind ourselves we're not the taste police, because we all have...
Oh, really?
I know. And we all have opinions when we see concepts come through, and there'll be, 70% of the office think that's amazing, and then there'll be 30% who think, oh, that doesn't speak to me. So it is a really hard thing that we struggle through, and I know that governance has the same issue, because you do want to say what your opinion is. So we've got to... I guess our role as officers is to provide the framework and the structure for making decisions based on what is controllable in terms of an asset for the city and the public purse, etc. But we've just got to engender a certain amount of trust and confidence in the curatorial decisions, which is why we formed the advisory panel to sort of check our thinking with a sector to try and make sure that we aren't going down too much of a rabbit hole that we've created in isolation. So I guess what we've got to work out is what we are actually seeking. Are we seeking a rubber stamping, or are we seeking an infrastructure imbalance? So I guess it's about the information that you're presented with as governance, and our focus will be to try and keep you informed all the way along the line. So like we've done today, to just signal that we've got a real interest in CRL, to keep you on that information journey, and our next comms plan with CRL will involve elected member presentations on the detail. So I guess it's us to understand where that balance lies about information and what we're actually asking. I think it's going to be around the geographic spread, the durability, and the coverage of issues, to see are we actually presenting something that responds to our unique Māori identity, but also the demographics of our community that we live in.
Madam Chair, I think this is where our governance responsibility needs to step in, and that we need to be quite clear about our expectations here, because I don't think the staff should be put in the firing line in between perhaps some of, if I look back historically, some of the difficulties that we've experienced in the past. So our brief in terms of giving decision making needs to be, I think, more explicit going forward.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to raise, Councillor Fletcher, and I think we need to have an ongoing discussion about the governance of this critical but often vexed issue. And going back to Councillor Simpson's point, if we are going to look for benefactors, patrons and funders, we actually have to be nice to them, and we have a very recent example of where we almost lost the support of an exceedingly important arts patron and very generous company who gave something extraordinary to the city, and we were not exactly the easiest to deal with over
including
that. So
Barfoot and Thompson's own staff.
Councillor, I don't think that was necessary. I think we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for the most extraordinarily generous, beautiful gift to the city that's now very quickly a loved and iconic piece of art. I'll move on to Councillor Clow. Loved and iconic artwork that you are.
Thank you. Richard, thank you. This is public, a large public art outside, or sculptural generally. When are you coming back with something on our other public art, which is hanging in buildings? You've got a really good fix on things now, because the reason I say that is we've got a lot of art that is hidden to a degree, and I'll just give you an example out at Waitakere, out at the old, at the Henderson Payment Centre there. There are a couple of Anne Robinson glass pieces, which were the most expensive pieces that Waitakere valued, and they're sitting next to a service elevator with a bank of pamphlets right next to them.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest, it's just a crying shame. They should be, really, they should be in the Mayor's foyer. I mean, they're beautiful pieces of work, very valuable, and they're sitting in the most inappropriate place. Now, there's quite a few examples like that around the city that we're just sort of not getting a good fix on maybe where they are and where they should go. But that's just a classic example. So, and that is public art. I mean, obviously it's got to be inside and protected and that, but...
Just to respond to
Yeah,
that.
I think we need to pick that up. I rescued an Anne Robinson bowl sitting on top of a filing cabinet in the faux local board office. I nearly fainted. This is a $30,000
$30,000
glass bowl that someone was using to put business cards in, you know. So I think, thank God, the inventory is being done because people just don't know what they don't know. And for those of us who've promoted, supported and protected our arts investment and the arts community for a long time, that kind of makes my hands go sweaty and me actually get quite grumpy. So thank you for the inventory that's been done and the serious OPEX that's now being attributed to that.
Because the two flowers that I were talking to, they're worth 40,000 each, I think, as well.
Just through you, Madam Chair, to respond to that, I did have a similar hernia when I walked into that office. That is the indoor collection, so that's not part of the public art assets, it's part of our indoor asset collection. Unfortunately, that budget was removed and no longer exists in terms of the indoor collection, so we haven't spent a lot of time to respond and do that. It was given up for savings 2 years ago.
Yep. We note that. Anyway, let's get back to something positive. We've got a really good CapEx project
Sorry,
here.
Chair, but are we noting that, therefore, you know, something to be addressed in the LTP? Because we just got millions of dollars worth of public indoor art that is just hanging around.
Councillor, prepare yourself for the onslaught from the Environment and Community Committee, who are putting together a very strong, well-structured and clear set of presentations to the LTP committee. We're gearing up, so, and that's on there. So I'm very happy to move the recommendations as they are. Councillor,
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Can I just really acknowledge the committee? These last two items have potentially been very difficult and divisive. I just want to really thank you for your attention to detail on this, because it is going to be a critical discussion going into the LTP where we are competing against everything else, but art and public art is actually the heartbeat of the city, and I think listening to the conversations now, it gives me enormous hope that we will follow this through. So thank you to our team for bringing this together.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your work. We've got one, the next item, item 14, is our information report, and because this was a short agenda, we've got one last item that we're going to deal with, which is, I'm just looking for, where are our stormwater guys? Are they here? Presentation on water. Oh, we're not. Okay. Just to explain to people what we're doing, we're not going to do it now. It's part. We've got our clean water submission package here, which we're just going to deal with as an information item. But as part of our workshop tomorrow, we're actually going to go into a lot of detail, or quite a bit more detail, on clean water, healthy waters, and stormwater. So we're going to take some of these issues that appear to be vital and just tucked away in the information only item and deal with them in workshops. So just to draw your attention to that. And the forward work program is there, if anyone has got any questions or comments on that.
Just a question, if I may. So is everything on track? I can see that it's what quarter you're up to, but is there anything that we have fallen behind, I suppose is my question.
Do you want to comment? I think we're pretty much, as far as I understand, we are...
Just a yes or no will
tracking.
do.
Yeah, we're
All
fine.
good?
We're all good.
That's good.
Busy but good.
That's good.
And I'm happy to move the information report.
Second that.
Someone second, thanks councillor Simpson. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Phew. So we aimed to finish so that we could have our workshop starting at 11:30. This is the workshop on the future of golf and golf infrastructure, which I know has a lot of interest. So we'll take a quick 10-minute break and then we will go into the workshop. So I'll declare the meeting closed, but I do hope that people stay for this critical workshop. Thank you all, and thank you for the excellent attention to business today. Thank you.